Good afternoon. I'm Drew Spaniel, the founder and director of research for Mission Critical, a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between academia, industry, and government to develop and disseminate interdisciplinary, peer-reviewed, technical, and non-technical research focused on improving critical infrastructure security and resilience. Today, on our Critical Insights series, we are joined by Mission Critical Fellow Don Maclean. Don is a cybersecurity and compliance expert whose career in government cybersecurity gives him an insider's view of what works and what doesn't when it comes to federal cybersecurity. His extensive consulting and government contracting experience, ranging from program manager to chief cybersecurity technologist, affords him a boots on the ground perspective into the complexities of cybersecurity regulations and what it takes to earn the trust of the C-suite. Don is currently consulting with leading organizations on compliance issues. Welcome, Don. I think your experience affords you unique insight into today's topic, and I'm excited to speak with you and share your perspective with our audience.
Thanks for having me, Drew. I look forward to talking about this important topic of how we maintain continuous authority to operate so that we can concentrate on other aspects of security.
Absolutely. On these critical insight discussions, we usually try to level set with the audience. So for today's topic, would you mind providing sort of a high-level overview of continuous authority to operate, or cATO, and how it can be used to improve the security of organizations?
Sure. Well, I have done many security assessments under the risk management framework and other rubrics for the federal government. And what I found was that the goal, of course, is always to achieve the authority to operate. But what happens with this traditional approach is that, first of all, the process is labor intensive and therefore expensive. In addition, as soon as the authority to operate is achieved, it can quickly become obsolete. So you put a lot of time, effort, and resources into this effort to make sure that everything is in order according to all of the requirements of 853 or whatever standard you're using, only to find that something changes in your system, something changes in your environment, someone adds something, someone updates a system or a piece of software, and now all of a sudden you're not really authorized, you're not really in compliance, even though technically you are authorized to operate. The threat landscape, the threat and attack landscape changes all the time, so as well. So you can find that everything is really in order one day, but then a month later, 2 months later, a 0-day comes out. You're not really prepared to deal with it, and even though you have authority to operate, you're not really as protected as you'd like to think that you are. In addition, and this is a little awkward to say, but I have to be honest about it, I often saw abuse of poems. People would misuse poems for things they weren't really meant to do. I'll leave that as a teaser for now. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later on. The other thing too is that because ATO, the assessments and the achievement of an ATO is based largely in interviews or examination of documents, a human-to-human contact, it is fairly or unfairly seen as adversarial. So there can be a lot of resistance and friction and unnecessary conflict surrounding ATOs that are done manually. So that's also something that the traditional ATO process evinces. And then finally, some of the remediation efforts can be lax or sometimes ignored. You'll find something that needs to be fixed, and then unfortunately it just goes untended for too long. So I've listed out a whole laundry list of problems with traditional ATO approaches. Continuous ATO or automated ATO, or some people say ATO as code, can address a lot of these issues, and we'll get into them perhaps as we go on. But that's basically the idea, is to take the humans out of it so that it's faster, less adversarial, and more consistent, and can keep pace with the changes in your system or the changes in the threat and attack landscape.
No, I think that's a great explanation. I think you have some great points on that. You mentioned your experience working with the other government frameworks and things. How does, just as, again, I know this would be a deeper topic, maybe for a follow-up to this, but how does cATO differ from some of those previous models, frameworks, approaches, or paradigms?
Well, the key is that it's continuous, of course, but it can't be continuous by that continuity can't be achieved by humans. It has to be done through automated processes, or at least semi-automated processes. So to take some of these problems, one by one, just for example, the time human paperwork, labor-intensive assessments and ATOs are time-consuming, expensive. Well, there can be an upfront cost to establishing an automated system that might initially cost more, but over time, the return on investment is great, because you don't have so many people sitting in chairs and talking to people. And there's both the cost of paying the consultant or the system integrator or whoever you've engaged to do the assessment, but there's also the hidden cost of the time and effort spent by the people who are involved in your organization with the assessment itself. Who knows how many hours are spent by by system administrators going over these ATO processes. When I was working for government, when I was working for a government contractor doing these assessments, it was not uncommon for one person to be a system owner for many systems, sometimes as many as 10 or 12. And when each of those goes through an extensive assessment and ATO process, that can chew up a lot of time just for that system owner or system administrators alone. So one of the ways that it differs is by just simply being more automated and taking the humans out of the equation to the extent possible. It also differs in that the ATO is updated, or alerts or things that need to be fixed are presented to the user of the continuous ATO system, so the ATO doesn't become obsolete as quickly, or rather, what I should say is it may become obsolete, but you're notified of that, and you can patch it more quickly than the traditional 3-year cycle or even a 1-year cycle. In other words, about problems faster,
right,
quicker, and more. And of course, as with any problem, whether it's a physical illness or any kind of problem, the sooner you catch it, the easier it is to fix, right?
Right, and hopefully it's moving faster than speed of government.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, people like to, joke a little bit about the slow speed of government. I would offer that I've seen many large organizations move slowly. Large organizations move slowly. It just,
right.
It's like a big aircraft carrier. It doesn't matter whether it's government or a very large multinational conglomerate or a big charitable organization. It's just in the nature of a large organization, of course, to move somewhat slowly by their nature. So, the more you can automate processes, provided those processes are effective and to the point, the more you're going to overcome some of that slowness that's inherent in a large organization such as the government. Those are a couple of the ways that that a continuous ATO or automated ATO process is different from the traditional ATO. It takes the humans out of the equation, keeps pace with the attack landscape of the changes in your system. It keeps you notified so that it doesn't become obsolete and just sit around as sort of a stale piece of paper. It makes it a live, dynamic certification that actually starts to mean something, rather than just, oh, we finished the paperwork, thank goodness, now we don't have to do that for another 3 years or a year or whatever the time frame might be. So
no, I think that's a great response. I know from the guidance that's been issued from the Department of Defense, they require that cATOs have continuous monitoring, real-time, proactive cyber defenses, and the adoption of strategies that align with the approved DevSecOps reference diagrams that they provide. But you mentioned that cATO is sort of minimizing the human drawbacks, let's say. I don't think it's entirely removing the human element, but for the human parts that are there, what can be done to facilitate the technical, the organizational, or the cultural changes that are sort of necessary to transition to a cATO model, because you still have to deal with that human element.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. First of all, the good news is that by being an automated process, it's seen as objective and less adversarial. In other words, I've been in situations where, never having met a system owner, I sit down for the kickoff meeting to do an assessment and to determine the ATO. And before I've even spoken to this person, they've assumed that I am there to embarrass them, to expose all of their flaws and all their weaknesses to the world, and have been told explicitly so, and that I should, well, do inappropriate things, right? Just go away and leave them alone, right? Even though I couldn't. So obviously that does not create an environment that's strong for really working collaboratively with the system owners of these, system administrators, or whoever's responsible for for the systems, to really implement good cybersecurity, address weaknesses. They're just looking to evade, to fool the teacher, to fool the assessor, to fool the tax guy, right? So automated continuous ATO, what that does is it minimizes or helps to mitigate some of that adversarial nature, because you're not looking at a human who's out to get you. You're just looking at the results of an objective computer system that said, hey, this document is out of place, or is out of date, or your configuration on your firewalls isn't quite up to snuff. Let's just fix it. So now the hard part, though, is that there's a lot of money to be made in doing these assessments. Consulting organizations and system integrators, it depends on the nature of the contract, but when I was working on these things, it was often on an hourly basis. So the more butts and seats you could come up with, and the more they had to spend time doing these, the more money you made. Now, you did it in good faith, so you didn't gouge or overcharge or anything like that. But at the same time, the incentive was more time, more work, more hours, more money, right? So contracts can be let out with that in mind. Now, if it's a firm fixed price contract, then it's a different animal altogether. If it's a firm fixed price contract, then the contractor has an incentive not to get the job done as quickly as possible. So what one approach is to use a firm fixed price model rather than an hourly basis or an IDIQ contract model, so that the contractor is incentivized to do things in as automated way as possible, because they're going to get paid the same on a firm fixed price whether they put 4 people on the contract or 1 person. And if they can put 1 person on, they make more money. So that gives them a good incentive. Problem is, a lot of contracts have already been awarded and may have a multi-year renewal in place. So, but one way to acculturate that is to look at a different contracting model. That may run into opposition, of course, from the contractor, who may want to maintain their money-making process. On the contractor side, to deal with that, if that comes at you, we'll say, hey, look, all right, so we don't have to have 4 people doing this assessment work, but we could have 1 person doing the assessment work, but 3 people doing more nitty-gritty, technically oriented work around incident response, monitoring, that sort of thing. The typical security operations center functions. So you could just retool those people, and quite honestly, they probably are looking for a break anyway, because the truth be told, this compliance work gets pretty mind-numbing after a while. I know, because my mind was pretty numb after a while. So.
Definitely. I think maybe I know I'm not sure if you're familiar with the saying, but I think this might be an apt place for the saying that the hallmark of a good compromise is when no one's happy, in the sense that it might be a situation where I think somewhere in between the two contracting states might be the most viable solution, because you mentioned that there can be kind of hourly bloat, let's call it.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, if it's the fixed contract, we also don't want situations where corners are cut, just so that contractors can move on to the next.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
really a collaborative approach is sort of needed to remove the contention between
Right.
the two sides, but to sort of show that cATO is sort of the gold standard for cybersecurity risk management.
Yeah.
To so, but I mean, part of that is also that that comes with the automation on the maybe the more
Right.
governance side, is that as you mentioned, I think in your response to the question before that, you had mentioned this, but the evaluation criteria, changes, and organizations can be notified of those changes, and obviously,
Yeah.
the certifiers need to work with that as well. But
Right.
to set and maintain the goal of sort of dynamic evaluation criteria that's regularly updated and outpaces evolving threats, what technical, non-technical, cultural, or other steps can organizations kind of take, or how can you best show the C-suite how to pre-position or preempt, updates in that evaluation criteria? I don't know if that's too
Well,
complicated there, but
yeah, it's a bit it's a bit of a multi-part question. But basically, the job descriptions may change. People may have to work in different areas. Some people who feel that they've really specialized in compliance work may find that they're expected to expand their repertoire to include more specific technical work, penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, things like that. That can either be presented as a something, hey, do it or get out, which is, I think, the wrong way to do it,
yeah,
or as, hey, you know what, here's a new opportunity for you. You can expand your skill set. You can become more marketable. You can become more, and you can do a different kind of work than you used to. And it'll probably be more interesting than what you're used to. You know, and that's particularly true for younger people. I mean, I remember I figured out early on that while it was important to master specific technologies and skill sets, I also knew that they'd probably be obsolete and no good in short order. My whole career has been, learning something, use it once, okay, on to the next thing. So that's something that probably is a good idea for people that are in that world to get used to, is that, hey, you know what, you may need to learn new techniques and tools. Also, it's quite likely, just as people in the SOC get alert fatigue and are get sick of doing what they're doing repetitively, so too do the compliance folks get sick of the same cycle of events. They're probably going to want to change after you do a couple of these. You've seen one, I won't say you've seen one, you've seen them all, but they do reach a point where you need to expand your horizons a bit. So you can acculturate people by giving them new skill sets, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to grow in the technical field of cybersecurity. And most people are going to embrace that. There might be a few that don't, but most people will see this as a positive thing. However, change is always difficult for everybody. So the more you position it, socialize it in advance, and the more you position it as a win-win for everyone, the more you can overcome that inherent resistance to change. I'm reminded too, talked about continuous monitoring, which is sort of like the proto cATO. And I remember many years ago starting a contract, and continuous monitoring was part of the whole risk management framework cycle. And the government was our client, and they assumed that was a automated process, which indeed it should be, and indeed it seems like it should be from the title or from the name of the phase in the process. But the thing is, there really wasn't any technology to do that, and so that was as the saying goes, it took a little bit of explaining.
right.
So
And I
you know
don't know, if even that capability is quite there yet. It's still
Yeah,
something that we're working
it's not
towards.
really where it's at. I mean, you can't. This isn't plug it in and walk away. It just a lot of these systems will really take some of the burden off of the individual. You know, even simple things like just organizing the documentation and updating it can be incredibly helpful. You know,
Oh yeah,
core and mechanical things like, you know, if there's an update, you know, to a key document such as 853, you know, cross mapping the requirements from one version to the next and determining what artifacts are still valid for the new set of requirements is an incredibly time consuming and tedious process that definitely lends itself to automation, but used to be done quite a lot by hand, you know. Excel, you know.
yeah. No, but
Lots of
I
Excel.
think not to keep throwing kind of phrases at you, but I think this is sort of where it kind of highlights that results are always behind the tedium.
Yeah,
Nothing happens in a vacuum. There's no lightning in a bottle. There's no silver
yeah,
bullet solution.
yeah,
Everything requires a certain amount of either manual work or automation, or it doesn't happen.
right,
It's not just a checkbox.
right.
Um, Now, I do love a lot of your responses here because I think you keep kind of pulling back to some common themes with this that are sort of core to mission critical here, with continuous need to learn
Oh,
and adapt to things.
right.
Collaborative between different parties and sort of multi-stakeholder perspectives. So I think this is a sort of a great discussion, Don.
Well,
Um,
thanks. You know, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, no. I was just going to ask, as well as the using cATO to improve organizational security and operations. How can cATO also be leveraged, at more of a maybe a microscopic scale to just improve, the software development process?
Well, I'm
Kind of
not
taking
sure
it
it
from high
can.
level to the granular slightly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it is specifically and concretely applicable to improving the software development process. However, infrastructure. A lot of people will refer to continuous ATO also as ATO as code. That's actually a term that I believe was coined by a company called Stack Armor and the CEO and founder Gaurav Paul, who goes just by GP because we never say his name correctly. But anyway, uh, um, yeah. So there's a lot of similarity between the uh, infrastructure as code or software development process, you know, that that can be leveraged or that it parallels the ATO or continuous ATO or ATO as code uh, um, concept. I think that's a whole nother world. I think that'd be a great topic for another webinar. So
Oh, definitely.
I'm gonna punt that one down the road. I'm gonna kick the can down to the road. Let's take that up on another webinar because that's a really interesting topic. The parallels between especially infrastructure as code uh, uh, and um, and ATO as code and how they can parallel one another.
No,
Um,
I think that's a perfect way to tee up future discussions, and I actually kind of like that
sure.
response, Don, because I think it
Okay.
you had well no I'm serious. You had mentioned
Yeah.
sort of within your career taking lessons from skills you've learned and kind of applying them
Yeah.
later on or applying them to learn new things. And I think this is sort of your answer kind of encapsulates that with regards to cATO. It's learning from cATO's process and trying to then apply sort of the higher level or the I don't know, meta maybe is a good term for this.
Yeah.
Sort of the learning how to learn, like what lessons did we
Right.
learn? Sort of
Right.
the steps, and how do we apply that downstream, even if it's not exactly the same process.
Right.
And I think that's an important insight because we otherwise we're trying to start everything from scratch again, and we're not
Yeah.
actually progressing anything. Progress happens
Yeah.
incrementally.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great foundation for a future discussion in this series.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you know, uh, in addition to maybe that insight from you there, are there any additional thoughts you'd like to impart on our audience today?
Well, I teased the whole poem abuse thing earlier, so I'm going to not just let that hang. Uh, there that also could be a topic for a whole webinar, but let me just give you an example that I think illustrates some of the value of cATO.
Sure.
When I was doing assessments for the government, one thing that would happen frequently is that we would find a relatively minor flaw. I mean, something very trivial, like the documentation or policy as stated doesn't really match what you're doing. What you're doing is fine, but the policy should be updated. That's usually like a 10-minute process, or you get somebody that's in the authority to just rubber stamp it. It shouldn't be any big deal. But I would be asked to create a POAM, plan of action and milestone, to fix this minor issue and to assign to it some colossal amount of money that was wildly out of proportion. And the reason was cybersecurity programs are chronically short on money. POAMs would be consolidated into budget requests. The people who approve the budget requests are not going to look under the covers too much, and so they say, "Oh, you need $600,000 to fix everything." Well, you don't really. What you really need is $600,000 to make things better. But this was the kind of subterfuge that is understandable. It's not, it's means justifies the ends kind of thing. You understand why people do it. At the same time, it's not really kosher, right?
Right.
You shouldn't be asking for $10,000 to update a paragraph in a piece of documentation, right?
Right.
In 40 hours. I mean, that's just silly. But that money could be reallocated and used for, new firewalls or new security equipment, or, something more sophisticated that was addressing real problems, right? So, or an additional pen test or something like that. So this is the kind of thing that unfortunately happens behind the scenes. I'm certainly not going to name any individuals or any organizations where I saw it happen, but it's well motivated, right? It's
Right.
not like people aren't doing this in order to make money for themselves or steal or do anything, traitorous. They're doing it because they want to make security better, but they've been kind of handcuffed into this sort of somewhat absurd, practice. And a cATO can kind of get rid of that, because what in its best manifestation, it will reduce the cost of doing this ATO and assessment work. I mean, many agencies where I worked, 60 to 70% of the cybersecurity budget went toward the whole compliance effort. Compliance is important, and you can certainly talk to a guy named Jacob Horn from Summit 7, who is adamant that compliance is in fact security. Debatable point, although he makes some pretty strong arguments in favor. But the point is, even if you believe that compliance is security, 60%, 70% to devoted to that is probably out of proportion. So I think that this is one of the things that cATO or ATO as code can address, is to make the whole paperwork process cleaner and quicker and more efficient. It's not going to solve all the problems, like you said, it won't take the human element, but it really will improve it so that that money can be legitimately and openly and transparently requested for the security engineering type work or security engineers that a CISO really wants to exploit to make his nation safer, our nation safer. So.
No, absolutely. I think, if you don't mind me saying, Don, one of the things that I've learned from you throughout my career has sort of been the need to effectively communicate, especially to C-suite executives or various bodies. And I think what you're hitting on is, there wouldn't need to be this budget obfuscation or kind of vague requests if the process was streamlined, things were automated, and it was just easier to communicate what is needed and what is happening.
Right.
And I think that's sort of the nail you're kind of hitting on the head to a certain extent. So, thank you as always for that.
Well, you're welcome. I hope that was that's a worthwhile lesson. So.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
No
where
problem.
can our audience find you, best engage with you if they have any questions, or if they'd like to collaborate with you on anything?
My contact information is here on the screen, Don at dmaclean-LLC. And you can also reach out to one of the more significant vendors in this space, which is Stack Armor.
And If any of our audience members would like to collaborate with Mission Critical on upcoming research publications, including with Don on some of our upcoming
No.
publications, or on our upcoming initiatives, or just participate in this Critical Insights series, please follow us on LinkedIn at Mission Critical. Engage with our fellows such as Don and our content at missioncritical.org, where Don's email will be linked as well in his bio, or email us at collaborate@missioncritical.org. Thank you so much, Don, and have a great
Thank you.
rest of your week.
Thank you, Drew.